London's Heathrow Airport says passenger numbers grew faster than any other airport in the world last year, but it still faces operational challenges. The UK's busiest hub says the number of passengers trebled in 2022 after COVID restrictions were lifted. Over 61 million passengers passed through the airport last year, compared with 19 million in 2021. But that number is still 25% down on the pre-pandemic year of 2019. Well, the airport's pre-tax annual losses also halved to around $825 million in 2022. That's down from over $1.5 billion the year before. But as Heathrow shows signs of recovery from its pandemic troubles, there are further challenges ahead. Over 3,000 workers are voting whether to strike, with potential walkouts over the busy Easter holiday. Well, let's talk to Sally Gethin, an independent aviation expert. Sally, welcome. Heathrow says its passenger numbers have trebled. It's made record profits. Has the pandemic gone forever and the aviation industry recovered?
The industry is recovering, but it's still short of the levels in 2019. And the prediction is for global recovery back to that time will come in 2024 and possibly in 2025, depending on the region of the world. So North America and Europe are leading the recovery, including the UK, with Asia Pacific lagging. That's because, of course, the way the pandemic was handled and the way the shutdowns affected the traffic levels. So Asia Pacific was a bit slower to come out of the pandemic, but the UK was first to exit, followed by Europe. So, but generally, everything's going in a positive direction. And despite all the global problems and challenges, for example, geopolitical instability, for example, and some economic downturns, it's still on a growth path in the long run.
Let's just drill down closely into Heathrow, because it has this self-imposed cap on passenger numbers during the peak summer holidays, but it still grew more than any other airport in the world, it claims. How come? How did they do that?
Well, in fact, the CEO, John Holland-Kaye, said recently that last year was the most painful year of our lives, he said at Heathrow. So it was the ultimate challenge, because they had to ramp up from zero, basically, when all restrictions were lifted. And they basically weren't ready for that. They had no revenues coming in particularly. So, and they lost a lot of staff. There were no compulsory redundancies, but they lost a lot of staff nevertheless. And they recruited about 25,000 people in the last 18 months to try and compensate for that. So they've been on the back foot, but they had to impose that flight cap, as you mentioned, because there was a surge in pent-up travel, sometimes in pent-up demand, sometimes called revenge travel, as people wanted to get out of the country after being in restrictions on and off for so long. So it was managing that, finding that balance that Heathrow had to deal with. So that accounts for this huge surge in passenger numbers, but also the drop in revenues, because it was carrying huge losses anyway from the shutdowns the previous year. And so it has had to ramp up very quickly, but not had the revenues coming in quite the same way as they were so frozen for a number of years beforehand. Before
they rush out to open the duty-free champagne at Heathrow, I mean, it's worth pointing out that it's not all good news, is it? I mean, they still made this pre-tax loss of, what was it, £684 million. I mean, that's not so great, is it?
No, and like I said, that has been the hit that they've had to take. I mean, their operating costs have been higher, higher employment costs due to ramping up the recruitment, as I said, the higher rate of inflation, for example, and also they have a lot of capital expenditure coming up. They have a baggage system in Terminal 2, which is 40 or 50 years old. That has to be completely replaced. That's a big expense. And also the airport's planning to make an announcement regarding a potential third runway later this year. They also have some changes in the management structure, in the management there, because the CEO is standing down after a long, successful tenure, actually, as CEO. So there are some changes afoot that they have to navigate, and all this increasing costs, operational and also expenditure coming online too.
Sally, good to talk to you. Thanks so much for coming on the programme. Sally Gethin, the independent aviation expert.